class after next week, where you'll have readings on Mondays, homework on Wednesdays, and then reflection question on Fridays. But we're not quite there yet, since Labor Day is still to come. So this week, and to a lesser degree, next week will look a little different. So for this week, instead of having a reflection question for Friday like you did last week, you have some reading to do. So we're reading chapters 5 and 6 in the book. I also think I noted on the syllabus that I'd recommend that you read chapter 3. That will be helpful, but it's optional. If you read 3, I'd read it before 5 and 6. And let me just remind you, there's a quiz that's due by 11:59 Sunday night. You have as much time as you need to work on it, but you've only got the one attempt. So once you start it, you should complete it. But that's not due till 11:59 Sunday. But please don't forget about that. Okay. And then Monday we have Labor Day. I forgot about Labor Day until yesterday. So that was a nice thing to remember. Nice long weekend. All right, but today we're just going to go through the homework assignment for today. Okay. I know I've signed ad slips for a few of you yesterday or Monday. So if you've just added, just see me after class for a minute or two so I can tell you what you've missed and make sure you get caught up and don't lose out on any points. Okay. All right, so in the chapter 1 exercises, we're just looking at, in 1A, whether the claims being made are moral or descriptive. So each of these claims is either moral or descriptive. Okay? So number 1, people tend to do what's in their own best interest. Justin, what'd you say for that one? Where's Justin? Justin is here, isn't he?
Me? Are there two Justins?
What's your last name?
Ballestero?
Yeah, that's you.
Oh, okay.
So what do you think? People tend to do what's in their own best interest. Is that a moral or a descriptive claim?
I don't think I answered that one.
Okay. That's the first one. If you didn't answer it, you didn't answer it, but
Oh, you're talking about the reflection question?
yeah.
Oh.
No. The practice exercises. So this is today's homework that was due today. Okay. Amanda, what'd you say? Is that a moral or a descriptive claim?
Okay, can I open on my phone?
Yeah, it's fine.
My computer is. So, number 1, right?
Yeah, 1A number 1. Mm-hmm.
I said that people tend to do what's in their own best interest. It is a descriptive claim.
Okay.
It is saying what people usually do.
Okay.
The word is different.
Yeah. Now, if you explained it, that's great. You didn't have to go on and explain why it's descriptive or why it's moral. But if you did, that's perfectly fine. And we'll talk about it a bit so that everybody's clear. But yeah, this is just describing behavior. So if it were a moral claim, what would the claim be doing? What is a character? What makes a moral claim a moral claim? What do moral claims do? They tell us what we should do, what we ought to do. They either evaluate behavior, right? So it was bad that you lied to your boyfriend, or it was, it's good that you helped that little old lady across the street. That was a compassionate thing to do, or a kind thing to do. Okay. So they evaluate behavior, or they prescribe behavior. What does it mean to prescribe behavior? Any ideas? What's it? Okay, the word prescribe is from prescription, right? Where do you most use the word prescription? Medicine. Okay, what is a prescription? something you take, okay? Doctor gives it to you, you know, the doctor gives you a little slip, and then you go pick up your prescription from Hy-Vee or CVS or Walgreens or whatever. Okay? And what does the prescription say on the bottle generally? What kind of information does it have? Especially how to take it, right? It'll have your name on there, and it'll tell you, you know, this is, you know, I don't know, I don't even know if Cymbalta is a thing anymore. Cymbalta, and it's 100 milligrams or whatever it would be, and then it tells you what? What's the most important thing for you to know as the person who's gotten the prescription?
How many times you take it a day and how much?
Okay. Take one pill with 3 times a day at meals, or take, you know, 2 pills before bedtime, or something like that, right? It's telling you what to do. That's what the prescription is. So a prescription is something that tells you what to do. Your doctor is telling you when he gives you or she gives you a prescription, you know, what to do with the medicine that you need, okay? So prescriptive statements or moral claims tell us what to do. Evaluative statements judge how somebody is or what they've done. Okay? And moral claims have those sorts of features in common, right? They tell us what's good or bad, right or wrong. All right, number 2, abortion in the first and second trimesters is legal. Kazuki, what did you say for that one? Is that descriptive or prescriptive? Descriptive. Okay? Let me make a distinction here that I think will eventually be helpful, because sometimes in this book they don't make distinctions between moral claims and legal claims in ways that I think would be helpful. So let me just explain to you how moral claims and legal claims are similar and how they're distinct. Okay? A lot of times we think of moral claims and legal claims as overlapping or being largely the same sort of thing, right? So that if something's illegal, it's immoral, okay? And that's certainly true in a lot of cases, right? Is murder illegal? Yeah. Is murder also immoral? Yeah, I mean, and we would probably say, right, that murder is illegal because it's immoral. If it weren't an immoral behavior, we likely wouldn't have laws against it. Do we generally think that not telling the truth is immoral, or that we ought to tell the truth? The moral thing to do, generally speaking, is to tell the truth. Okay? If you misrepresent somebody in some way, if you slander them, might you get in legal trouble? Yeah, right? So there we have, again, some legal standards or claims that have they're rooted in moral claims. And that's true for a lot of legal claims. But it's not true for all of them. And there's a distinction that we can make between legal claims and moral claims for a couple of reasons. All right, let's talk about one of those reasons. Anybody here from the UK? Nobody's from the UK, right? Okay. Is anybody here from a country where you drive on the left side of the road? Kazuki, in Japan, you drive on the left side of the road, not the right side? Oh, okay, I didn't know that. So if you drive a car here, do you drive here at all? You haven't driven here? Okay. If you were to drive here, would you find it kind of nerve-wracking? Would you be a little nervous at first? Because you'd be worried about whether you're driving, you know, the turns feel different and all sorts of stuff, right? Okay. Is there anything that's inherently right about driving on the right side of the road, or inherently wrong about driving on the left side of the road when you, okay? Or vice versa, inherently right if you're from Japan about driving on the left side and wrong about driving on the right side? No. Is it important that you know what side of the road you should drive on where you are? those aren't really, and if you drive in Japan on the right side of the road, are you probably gonna get a ticket or something? You'll get in trouble. Driving on the left side of the road in the US, you're gonna get a ticket. You're breaking a law. But the law's not really rooted in morality per se. It's rooted in what we might call social convention. That's how we do things here. And it's important for you to know how to do things here so you don't get in trouble and potentially hurt people. But how we do things itself is not necessarily rooted in what's right or wrong. Same thing with stoplights, right? Green means what? Go. Red means? Yellow means what? I'll say it depends upon the conditions. Yeah. I mean, if you see the light turn yellow and it's quite a ways in front of you, Garrett, are you just gonna speed up and beat the light? That's what you're gonna do? Okay. I think I do know the answer, actually. All right. Is there anything inherent about red, green, and yellow that, make those the, morally right choices for the colors of stoplights? Could we have chosen, I don't know, fuchsia? Is that what we're going to call your hair color, Eddie? Fuchsia? Fuchsia, chartreuse, and blue. Okay? Could we have chosen those as colors for stoplights instead? I don't know. I have no idea where the colors for stoplights came from. Somebody probably came up with those ideas at some point. Okay? And we subsequently agreed. But there's nothing moral or immoral about the choice of colors, although it is important to know what those colors are. So again, some laws are just rooted in convention. Are there laws that are immoral? Or have there been laws? Maybe we would do to kind of avoid getting off track and talking about current controversies. Are there laws in the past or in other places that we would want to say were clearly immoral? Give me an example. Okay, I heard that was. What'd you say?
Black people can't vote.
Okay, so race-based restrictions on voting. Okay, in the United States, race-based restrictions on all sorts of things, like Jim Crow laws, and that. Okay, yeah, or when you could go to the zoo, or what entrance you used, or where you could, all sorts of stuff like that, right? And I said the zoo simply because I have this book at home of photos from the South during that time, and there's a picture of the zoo, and it has restrictions on it, or what drinking fountains you can use, and so on. Okay, bathrooms and such. Okay, all right. If we encounter a law like that, that's rooted in racism, how should we respond to it? Do we have an obligation to obey it? Is it morally right for you to obey a racist law? I would say it's immoral for you to obey a racist law. It would be legal. It might be in what you perceive to be your own best interest because you don't want to be arrested, perhaps. Right? But it would be immoral. And in the face of immoral or unjust laws, right, we have an obligation to try to change those laws. We might seek to resist them through civil disobedience. We might try to resist, to change them through political processes, and so on, right? But we have a moral obligation, at least. The thing that's morally right to do is to resist those unjust laws, okay? So law and morality are distinct, and I think it'll help you to keep in mind those distinctions. All right, so back to the exercises. Number 3, physician-assisted suicide is morally wrong. Benjamin, where are you? What'd you say for that one? Is that a moral claim or a descriptive claim? Moral claim. It's a moral claim, right? It tells you That's an action that is morally wrong. Okay. Number 4, a nurse has a moral obligation to treat all patients with respect. Isabella, what'd you say for that one? Is Isabella here? No, Isabella here. Can't remember who's here. Alex, what'd you say for that one?
I said it was descriptive.
Okay. A nurse has a moral obligation to treat all patients with respect.
Or what moral we write in the forefront, then probably moral.
Yeah. You know, if a nurse does not treat all of his or her patients with respect, what would we say about the nurse and their behaviors? They're immoral or jackasses, as Addie said. Yeah, that's a good. Maybe I'll just stop saying things are moral or moral. If it's immoral or something, I'll just say you're just a jackass, or that's jackassery.
Jackass behavior.
Yeah. Okay. Right? But it says, you know, it's prescribing a kind of behavior here, right? To treat patients with respect. Genetically modified wheat is an artificial crop. Addie, what about that one?
It's descriptive.
It's descriptive. Okay. All right, number 6. Legalizing recreational drug use produces more total pleasure in society than criminalizing those drugs. Wesley, how about that one?
Say that one again.
Legalizing recreational drug use produces more total pleasure, this is number 6, in society than criminalizing those drugs.
I put moral, but I could be wrong. I think I might have switched them up.
Okay. So you said moral, but you're unsure.
Yeah, I'm not for sure if I get that one.
Okay.
That one.
All right. Help me. Elijah, what'd you say?
Descriptive.
You said descriptive? Okay. Why did you say descriptive?
Because it's telling us how the world is, like it's not how we should be, it's how it is.
How would that, if it were moral, how would we make that, it is descriptive, how might we make that statement moral? A moral statement.
We should legalize recreational drug use because it produces more trouble.
Yeah, something like that, right?
I said it was moral because like people may not think that way though. Like people would think no, it doesn't. It doesn't increase total pleasure. Like it makes crime go up if you legalize recreational drugs. Like it makes crime go up. So how could it?
Okay, well, okay, it could be descriptive and be wrong, right? The fact that this might not be an accurate statement doesn't mean that it's moral, right? The fact that it is descriptive, I mean, I could, you know, I think I've said this already, right? If I say this room is 20 by 15 feet, okay, that's a descriptive claim that I've made. I think it's pretty obviously would be a false claim, right? So the fact that it, you know, if it's a descriptive claim, it simply is telling us how the world is or how the world might be. Can you imagine that we might, like a sociologist, say, might do a study that looks at a country before and after recreational drugs were legalized and looks at surveys of how pleasurable people find their lives. And they find that after legalization, people report that their lives have much more pleasure than before. Could you imagine that we might do that? Right? And that would just be a reporting, in that sense, a description of kind of how things were under those two different scenarios. Okay? So yeah, you know, this is one of the things that I think can be a temptation. When we talk about things like abortion or like drug legalization or like climate change, right? All sorts of issues like that, where people have very strong viewpoints about how they feel about those things. It can be a temptation, I think, to think of statements about those things as being either moral or immoral, or having to do with morality, right? But that's not always the case, right? There has to be some kind of evaluation or prescription. And here, We're just describing it. We're not saying whether or not legalizing recreational drugs is a good or a bad thing. We're just saying what happens when that occurs. This might be a reason for thinking that it's a good thing to do and we ought to do it, but that's not the claim being made. You could easily make it into that claim, but we haven't done that, at least not yet in this sentence. Okay, number 7, people often make sacrifices for their friends and family. Rodolfo, what did you think about that one? Descriptive or moral? Where's Rodolfo? Oh, you didn't do this, but what do you think? Is that a statement, if I say people often make sacrifices for their family, their friends and family? Am I saying that that's just how things generally are? Or am I saying that that's how things should be? Yeah. Okay. And if that's how things generally are, then that's a descriptive claim. Okay. Do we generally think it's good to make sacrifices for friends and family? Yeah. So if we said it's good that people often make sacrifices for friends and family, that would be a moral claim. But just to say that that's something that people in fact often do is just a descriptive claim. All right, number 8, policies that systematically make it harder for racial minorities to vote are unjust. Jesus, how about that one? Okay. Anybody say moral? Okay, why'd you say moral?
Because I said unjust in the end.
Yeah. So it doesn't overtly say that these policies are immoral, right? It doesn't use that language specifically, but the word unjust is evaluative, right? It's making an evaluation of policies to say that they're not right, they're unfair, or something like that. Okay? So that they're unjust, that the claim being made here is that they're unjust, that makes it a moral claim. Okay? Number 9, you're morally required to save another person's life if you can do so without risking your own. Destiny, how about you? Where's Destiny? What do you think?
Moral claim.
Yeah, right? It's telling you what you ought to do, right? Or what you have to do. Okay? Number 10, students should never cheat on an exam. Peter, what do you think? Moral or
This one is moral.
it's moral, right? It's telling you what you shouldn't do with when you take an exam. All right, and number 11, physicians who withhold potential risks from patients undermine their community's trust in medical institutions. Jaleel, how about that one? What do you think?
I got lost, I'm sorry.
Number 11 in exercises 1A, physicians who withhold potential risks from patients undermine their community's trust in medical institutions. Do you think that's a descriptive claim or a moral claim?
I said descriptive, but that may be.
Okay, I don't want you to feel uncertain about it, though. You don't have to, like when you guys answer questions, you don't have to follow it up with, but I'm probably wrong about that. I want you to feel confident about what you're answering. Okay? So it's important that we understand why they're one thing or the other, why answers are what they are. But that's right, this is descriptive, right? If your physician and everybody else's physician in this room started to withhold information from you, would that undermine your trust in your physician? Yeah. Now, we probably all think not only would it do that, but that would be a bad thing and they shouldn't do that, which I would argue is true. But all we're doing here is describing what would happen when physicians withhold risks from patients, withhold information from patients. We're not making an overt judgment about it, at least not in this statement here. I could well imagine that the next sentence would be a sentence that does make a moral judgment, but this sentence is just describing how things would be if that were to happen. All right, let's see. I can't remember what we're doing in 1B. 1 through 6. Okay, so let's look at 1 through 6 in 1B. We're identifying these as either moral arguments or not. So, number one, voter intimidation, which is intimidating to get someone to get them to vote for a particular candidate or to prevent them from voting, is illegal. Impersonating an election official to falsely convince someone they don't have the right kind of ID to vote is voter intimidation. So impersonating an election official to falsely convince someone they don't have the right kind of ID to vote is illegal. Kelly, where's Kelly? What do you think? Descriptive or I'm sorry, is that a moral argument or not? No. Okay. It's just telling us what kind of case would be legal or illegal. Okay. If we say that it should be, something, or it's wrong, then that would be moral. But here we're just describing whether it fits the definition of being legal or illegal. Okay. Number two, it is good for teachers to have policies that improve student engagement in the classroom and that improve student comprehension and performance. Banning laptop and phone use in the classroom improves student engagement, comprehension, and performance. Therefore, it is good for teachers to ban laptop and phone use in the classroom. Vincent, where's Vincent? Descriptive. Okay. What if you're a teacher? Okay, let's say we made this argument and you're a teacher who hasn't banned laptop and phone use, okay? The person who's made this argument is going to think, what about the teacher who hasn't done that? Do you think they're going to think of the teachers doing the right thing or the wrong thing? Probably the wrong thing, right? So the use here of good, right, combined with what makes what they're talking about good is that it improves student performance, right? It benefits students in some way. There's a moral, to say that something is good in this regard is makes it a moral argument, okay? So to say that it's good for teachers to ban laptop and phone use in the classroom is to say that that's what teachers, at least according to the maker of this argument, that's what teachers ought to do, okay? And that if they don't do that, that they're failing their students or they're harming their students in some way, right? So this would be a moral argument. Right, number three, it's wrong to put your pets at unnecessary risk. Keeping lilies in a place where they're accessible to your cat, well, who cares about cats, is an unnecessary risk to your pet. I wouldn't put your cat at unnecessary risk. Thus, it is wrong to keep lilies in a place where they are accessible to your cat. I want to ask Puffin what Puffin thinks about this.
Puffin loves cats.
Okay. Would Puffin think that's a moral or a argument or not?
The way that they're putting it seems like
It's wrong to keep, the conclusion is it's wrong to keep lilies in a place where they are accessible to your cat. Yeah. Okay. Telling you what something is wrong, or if it were, if it said it was right to do that, that would be moral too. But to say that it's wrong, yeah, that's telling you what you shouldn't do. It's prescribing behavior. All right. Number 4, any practice that exploits vulnerable people ought to be illegal. Commercial surrogacy, right? So paying somebody to carry your child exploits vulnerable people. So commercial surrogacy ought to be illegal. Let's see here. I don't know if I can't remember if I've called on Mackenzie. Mackenzie? Where's Mackenzie?
It's moral.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Saying it, what we ought to do or ought not to do. So, or what ought to be the case or ought not to be the case. Okay. Number 5, gene editing technology. Let me just do these last two, and then because I want to make sure we get through most of chapter 4 stuff. Like CRISPR could one day allow us to eliminate genes for serious diseases such as Huntington's disease and so on. Eliminating genes for serious diseases would promote longer, healthier lives. Therefore, gene editing technology could one day promote longer, healthier lives. Okay, that That is not a moral argument. That's just a descriptive argument, right? We probably think that this would be a good thing, but that's not the claim that's being made here. It's not saying that promoting longer, healthier lives is something that we should do. Maybe there are good reasons not to do that. I mean, I'm not going to make that argument, but maybe somebody could make that argument. Okay? All this is saying is what gene editing technology is capable of doing. It's not saying whether that's a good or a bad thing, or a right or a wrong thing. Okay? So this is just a descriptive argument. Okay? But number 6 is a moral argument, right? People have a moral right. There's a reference to a moral right in that first premise, to be able to obtain an effective means of self-defense. Owning handguns is an effective means of self-defense. Thus, people have a moral right to own handguns. Okay, so that's a moral argument. Let me just be clear again, though, right? To say that any of these are arguments, whether moral or not, is not to say necessarily that they are in fact true. I mean, that's in part, when we're doing ethics especially, what's in question is whether or not the argument being made is one that we should find compelling, whether there are good reasons for it. Okay? So don't think that any of the arguments that are in this book necessarily reflect the author's opinions, or my opinion for that matter. These are just arguments, and that's not to say that they're true by themselves. Okay, so 4A, 1 to 3. Okay, so in 4A, oops, that's not the right ones. We're putting these arguments in standard form. So when we put an argument in standard form, what are we doing? Okay, we're simplifying it, and how do we simplify it? You're getting on there, I think, Alex.
Is it when each premise gets its own numbered line?
And then what else do we have?
It's followed with a conclusion.
Okay, right. Each premise gets its own numbered line, and then the premises, or the premise or premises are followed by the conclusion. And what do the premises do to the conclusion? They support it. They provide us for reasons to think that that conclusion is true. Okay? Most but not all of what we're going to look at today, and really for much of the semester, will tend to be relatively simple two-premise arguments. We'll occasionally see ones that aren't just two premises. We'll see one of those today. But generally speaking, most of the arguments are relatively simple two-premise arguments. Okay? That's not to say that they're always easy to analyze or to put in standard form. But we're not going to get into long, really long, complex arguments in this course. All right, so 4A, number 1. So here's the argument. Is death bad for the one who dies? No. After all, something is bad for you only if you exist when it happens, but you do not exist when you're dead. All right, so Hugh, what was your conclusion for number 1?
Something is bad for you only if you exist when it happens.
Okay, that's going to be part of the argument, but that's not the conclusion. Sorry, yeah, did I say conclusion, didn't I?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the conclusion of this argument?
Is death bad for the one who dies?
Okay, that's the question that the argument is addressing. So what's the answer to that question?
You do not exist when you are dead.
Okay, so look at you don't have your book in front of you, do you?
No.
Okay, let me read it one more time. Tell me what the answer to it starts out with the question. Tell me what the answer is. Is death bad for the one who happens? No. After all, something is bad for you, blah, 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 blah. So is death bad for the one to whom it happens? No. So putting that differently, we could say the conclusion is, therefore, death is not bad for you. Okay? All right. So what are the premises that support that? What was the very first thing you said to me, Benjamin? Hugh, rather, sorry.
Something is bad for you only when it exists when it happens.
Okay, yeah. So that's part of the argument. That's the first premise. So what's the second premise? Anybody?
When you die, you don't exist.
Yeah, right? You don't exist when you're dead, right? So something is bad for you only if you exist when it happens. You don't exist when you're dead. First premise and then second premise. Therefore, death is not bad for you. Okay? If you didn't understand how to do this or didn't quite get that in that way, does that make sense? You see how to do that? Okay? Let me remind you guys. What I'm looking for when you do the homework is just to see that you made a good effort on it. You may have an answer that is totally wrong. Everything's all mixed up, or you put something in there that isn't even in the in the argument in the exercise. Okay, that's okay. You're going to get credit. You get full credit for the homework if you've done the whole assignment. Okay, I'm not concerned at this point about whether or not you get these right when you first attempt them. That's what we're doing right now. We're helping you to learn how to get them right, and that's why we're going over them. Okay, so this is your opportunity to take your best shot, and hopefully, if you've done it well, you can feel like, oh, I really get it. But if you haven't done it quite as well as you would have liked, then classes like today's class are opportunities for you to figure out where you misunderstood and how to do it better next time. Okay, we're going to be putting arguments in standard form all semester. Okay. So this is your first shot at doing something that you're going to have lots of practice on. So, if you're struggling a bit, it's not a big deal. You'll have time to get kind of set. All right, number 3. Oh no, number 2. I'm sorry, we didn't do 2 yet. A being has moral rights only if it makes sense to hold it accountable for its choices and praise or blame it in moral terms for those choices. Thus, non-human animals do not have moral rights, since it makes no sense to hold them morally accountable for the things they do. Okay. Mackenzie? Did I call Mackenzie yet?
Yes.
Adonis. I haven't called Adonis. What do you think? What's the conclusion to 4A number 2? Yeah, non-human animals do not have moral rights. Okay? What did you have for the first premise?
You can't hold them accountable for what they do.
Okay. That would be better as the second premise. Okay? Why is that something that might be important? What was your other premise? Okay, what was anybody? What was your first premise?
A being is moral, it makes sense to hold it accountable for its choices.
Okay, a being has moral rights only if it makes sense to hold it morally accountable for its choices. Okay? And that's not something we can do with non-human animals. So it does not make sense to hold non-human animals morally accountable for the things they do. Thus, or therefore, whatever you want to say along those lines, non-human animals do not have moral rights. Okay? So in this case, right, this is what we would call an argument from principle. You have a broad claim that kind of establishes what it would mean for something to have, or what's necessary for something to have moral rights. And then you're applying that to a particular case, in this circumstance, non-human animals. And then you're drawing a conclusion about non-human animals, given that kind of criterion. Okay? How are we doing here? All right, let's, number 3, little trickier. Why was number 3 harder?
Had evidence to support its claim.
Okay, and what else? Longer, right? Number 3 is longer than number 1 and 2 put together. So you have more stuff there. So I don't know, if you didn't find it more difficult, that's great. But I'm gonna guess many, if not most of you, found this one a little more challenging. What's all the other stuff in there called? What do we call it? Supplemental information. We have all kinds of supplemental information here, okay? That supports the argument, supports the premises, illuminates or it illustrates the premises, but it's not itself part of the argument, right? The argument is just the premises and the conclusion. All right, so number 3, Parkinson's disease, like every other disease, must be caused either by inherited genetic factors or by environmental factors. Examples of inherited diseases are sickle cell anemia, cystic fibrosis, and Huntington's disease. Examples of environmentally caused diseases are skin cancer and lead poisoning. The evidence is strong that there is in most cases no inherited cause of Parkinson's. One especially strong piece of evidence it appears, one especially strong piece of evidence, it appears to be the case that the children of parents with Parkinson's are no more at risk of developing the disease than are people in the general population. Excuse me. Given this evidence, we can conclude that Parkinson's is caused by environmental factors. All right, so, Kiara, what's the conclusion for number 3?
Parkinson's is caused by environmental factors.
Yeah, okay. What'd you put for the first premise?
Diseases, including Parkinson's, must be caused by inherited genetic factors or environmental factors.
Okay, yeah. You could be specific because it's about Parkinson's, but you could also just say, generally speaking, diseases or Parkinson's disease must be caused by either inherited genetic factors or environmental factors. Okay? What was your second premise?
Children of parents with Parkinson's are no more at risk of developing the disease than people in the general population.
Okay, that's relevant. That's a relevant part of the argument, but that's all supplementary information. So what is that parenthetical remark illustrating? Why did they put that there to provide evidence for, or to back up, or to illustrate what?
Evidence of it not being genetically inherited.
Yes, right? That Parkinson's is not caused by inherited factors. And then what's in the parentheses just illustrates that, because children of people with Parkinson's are at no more risk to develop it than the general population. Okay, so we just put it in its standard form. We would say a disease or Parkinson's disease must be caused either by inherited genetic factors or environmental factors. So we have like something is either A or B. Premise 2, Parkinson's is not caused by inherited genetic factors, so it's not A. So if something has to be A or B and it's not A, it has to be B, right? So B is Parkinson's must be caused by environmental factors. Okay. How are we doing? Okay, let's... I'll do number 5 and then we'll move on and we'll do at least a few in 4B, okay? Number 5, if something exhibits goal-directed behaviors, then it is possible to benefit or harm it. If it is possible to benefit or harm something, then its interests deserve moral consideration. Furthermore, all living things exhibit goal-directed behavior. Every living thing strives, grows, procreates, and so on. All these behaviors count as goal-directed behaviors. That's why all living things deserve moral consideration. Okay, so in this one, we actually have 3 premises. Okay, first premise is that first sentence. If something exhibits goal-directed behaviors, then it's possible to benefit or harm something. To harm it, rather. Sorry. Premise 2, if it's possible to benefit or harm something, then it deserves moral consideration. Okay? So it would also follow, right, that if something exhibits goal-directed behavior, then its interests deserve moral consideration. All living things exhibit goal-directed behavior, therefore all living things deserve moral consideration. Okay, so 3 premises there. You could actually add, if you wanted to be even more explicit, you could add that little aside that I said there as the third and then have a 4th premise. So you could say, If something exhibits goal-directed behaviors, then it is possible to benefit or harm it. If it's possible to benefit or harm something, then its interests deserve moral consideration. So if something exhibits goal-directed behaviors, its interests deserve moral consideration. All living things exhibit goal-directed behavior, therefore all living things deserve moral consideration. That would be even more explicit if you wanted to put it that way, but you wouldn't have to do that. All right. Did that make sense? Okay, so in 4B, 2, 3, 4, and 8, we are providing the implicit content, the content that is implied but is not explicitly stated. Okay, so number 2, you should always eat locally grown food because eating locally grown food uses resources in a less environmentally damaging way than imported food. Okay, the conclusion here is that you should always eat locally grown food. What's missing is the first premise, okay, that establishes the criterion for what kind of food we should eat. What's the reason why we should choose locally grown food? Uses resources in less environmentally damaging ways, okay? So the first premise would be you should use resources in the least environmentally damaging way. Eating locally grown food uses resources in a less environmentally damaging way than imported food or whatever, or just in the least environmentally damaging way. Therefore, you should always eat locally grown food. Okay, so we had the first premise missing in number 1. What's missing in number 2? All actors are self-involved narcissists. Will Ferrell is an actor. Need I say more? So what's missing there?
Conclusion.
Okay, what is the conclusion?
Therefore, Will Ferrell is self-involved narcissist.
Yeah. Okay, Will Ferrell is a self-involved narcissist. Number 4, right? Yeah. Creatures with central nervous systems are sentient, and therefore dogs are sentient. Okay? First part of that sentence is the premise, and the second part of the sentence is the conclusion. How do we get from that premise about creatures with central nervous systems to dogs being sentient? What do we have to say about dogs? They have central nervous systems. Okay? All right. What did we miss? We didn't do 8. We can do 8 if you want at the beginning of class on Friday. Okay? Did it help to go over these? Yes. Is it making more sense? Yes. Okay. All right, guys. Have a good afternoon.